Well, good morning, everybody.
What's going on? How's everybody doing?
So good. Look at this.
Oh,
yeah,
don't get me
work
started.
it.
This is my jam.
Work it. You know what, Andrew? This reminds me back in the day when you used to you'd be out there mixing beats. You know, you would be there. Like I'd come out, 6 a.m. in the morning. You're just blasting
Music.
What was the main song you would play?
I thought-
It's dubstep o'clock.
I thought Andrew
EDM o'clock. That's
EDM
what it
o'clock.
was it
funny.
Andrew or was it you that was a DJ?
I did,
Oh,
I
wait.
did it
Andrew.
for a
That's
very
Andrew.
brief moment. I don't even know if I could be considered a DJ because I'd probably denounce and bring shame to all other DJs out in the world. But I would just get on the board and mess with stuff. So,
All right. Well, speaking of your past, why don't we actually start off there? Why don't you give everybody a little background on yourself?
Yeah. So met Andrew Jimenez, I'm actually started in this whole industry of insurance about, 7 years ago. But before that, really had no background. I was 21 years old, never done sales, never done insurance, never done anything like this before. I was stocking boxes in a warehouse for about $12 an hour. And I was just at a point in my life where I made $600 in rent, $600 in student loans, and $100 and something left over for food, gas, electricity, you name it. I would walk a mile and a half down to the grocery store and to actually shop at the dollar store. And that was for a loaf of bread, jar of jelly, and a jar of peanut butter. It was like $7. And then every pay period, I would actually go to Taco Bell and get 2 steak quesadillas, and that was like my cheat meal. And I was just kind of in this place of like absolute nothingness. Like it just kind of felt like I was so trapped. I'm like, how are you supposed to get ahead? Am I just supposed to get lucky at this point? Because I had almost nothing left over to really grow my life or do something with. But I always had these big, grand aspirations about like, man, I really want to be successful. So, I mean, that's how I got started in terms of like looking at insurance. And I said, man, I really hope I'm not Jake at State Farm or knocking on doors. But it's just been one hell of a ride.
Oh, how about you, Grant?
Well, I grew up in San Diego, moved out to Arizona to go to school at Arizona State. And when I was there, I kind of was in the last couple years of school there. I saw people kind of going into corporate America, climbing the corporate ladder, like getting internships. And I just felt that, being in kind of that rat race really wasn't for me. And so the way that I started is I started looking for odd jobs on Craigslist. I delivered flowers, which, by the way, when you have a car that has no air conditioning in the Arizona heat, the flowers were unhappy, and so was I. So, was running around all over the town kind of delivering flowers, which was fun to bring joy to people, but not the most fulfilling thing. And then, I really looked around and saw an opportunity to get into the insurance space and, kind of saw the freedom and flexibility that industry brought and just kind of the quality of the culture of the people that I first got to meet, yourself being one of the very early people that got me really excited about being here. And, from there, it's just kind of been a really cool journey.
I think the most important thing I heard out of all that was, just a quick question, did you actually roll down your window and for that kind of that Arizona air condition if you had?
Yep, the free sauna.
Okay,
It was just a blast furnace.
I love where your head's at on this. Okay, so my background. Okay, and so again, everybody, Ryan Miller here. Corporate America. God, 19 years in corporate America. Spent a long time there. Actually ended up being a self-employed. I say self-imprisonment at that point. And I don't know. Maybe have you guys ever had something that was like so like either tragic or something that made you actually look like really take a reflection and look at your life? Or am I the only person that's ever ran through that?
Not to the level that because I know your story, not to the level that you had, but it's kind of just those moments where you start looking in the mirror and you're like, something's got to change.
So for me, our family is like super, super important. Like we grew up, I'm one of 4 boys. My mom and dad originally from Yonkers in Queens, New York, and they were, we were just such a unit. In fact, my dad used to make this pizza so good Saturday, but we worked with each other. We saw each other every day, and since we couldn't make any more money, we wanted to buy and get our own franchise, right? Like we wanted to grow. So guess what happened to our family? Split all up. Kind of relationships kind of broke up a little bit. And then here's the moment. My dad was visiting my brother. He tripped and fell. My brother Carl's like, dude, hey, listen, Dad fell. And I'm like, okay, Dad fell. I'm like, is he all right? Yeah. Then next was like, I think I need to take Dad to the hospital. And the next text was, hey, need to get here right now. 8 days later, we're sitting on his deathbed, watching my mom rub my dad's forehead, talking about what kind of amazing husband he's been, what kind of amazing father he's been. And I sat there and I watched my dad pass away. Now, this moment of time, you guys, like, I mean, I pretty much hated everybody. I'm not going to, you can imagine, hated God, hated my parents for making us move around so much. I mean, 19 different states, you name it, we've been there. And then it got so for real when we're sitting at the like grave and I'm watching my brothers pour dirt on my dad's casket. And it was that moment right there where I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm done. No more exchanging time for money. No more building other people's dreams. Literally went back, closed the franchise because that entire industry was going from brick and mortar to online. Went back to Arizona, and that's where my wife's born and raised. And thank God she found an accidental death policy in a garbage bag. So my dad that passed by an accident, my mom ended up getting $150,000, which was the last like legacy that my dad left my mom. So who would have thought going from corporate America, you know that rat race where you kind of chasing the wrong kind of money. You know what I mean? The wrong kind of money when you got to exchange one or the other time or money. So it's funny we talk about change. Yeah. I think that's such a good. Why don't we jump on that topic? Because I think people can look at change in so many different ways. We can have fear to it. It's adversity to it. It's like, I don't know, Andrew, Grant, we'll start with you. Like what? When you hear, like, because it's a difficult thing, change is difficult, but what's your, like, understanding of change and how do you change that negative to positive, right? How can we look at that? It's not happening to you, but it's for you. So why don't we start with you on change?
Yeah. And, hearing your story so many times over, it always just kind of reminds me of like, getting back to the basics and just kind of, figuring out what's the most important. And so one thing you've always said so many times is that change occurs when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of having to make that change, because everything that we do normally, it's comfortable, it's kind of what we do, we get to have kind of that familiarity with it, and so whenever we dive into something unknown, there's always a ton of fear that's associated with it. And so I just think, like, Steve Jobs, he was talking about on one of his commencement speeches, he said, if I figure out that for too many days in a row, I ask myself, if this were the last day of my life, is this kind of how I'd want to live it? And if my answer is no for too many days, I know I have to make a change. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of look at that and, from where we are, and change is like, this could be a massive change to like maybe a career path. It could be a minor change to like, I'm going to be, healthier in a certain way. And I just think for me, what it's meant is that the mindset that I had 7 years ago, when I was that college student, is not the same mindset that would be capable of developing an organization, leading other people, making a strong amount of income. And so I knew that I had to make some improvements to myself if I was going to be a worthy enough person to kind of have all those things. So for me, it just came out of that necessity.
I just have to, I know I'm probably the oldest. In fact, I know I'm the oldest one on this podcast. So, and I just want to make this perfectly clear. Well, okay. It's insane. And so how old are you again?
27.
And how old are you?
28. He's about to be 28 though.
Next month.
The fact that you both have seen so much success and you're talking about this change. I wish when I was back at that age, that's the kind of drive. I just absolutely love it. And your perspective on change is really interesting, because that one part, John Maxwell, there's like 4 different seasons of change. The first one's that people will hurt enough where they have to change. And it's interesting because a lot of times we end up where our back is against the wall, and that's when you said, like you mentioned, the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change, and all of a sudden we have no other choice. We can't. It's either die or move forward. And it's like, Andrew, I'm shocked we got to get to that point, because it's interesting to me, like looking at your story, and yes, it was the light was out of the darkness for you, so you found the light, so that you were in that same position of hurt, but there's other changes, right? And you mentioned things like the mindset change, which is so important, because we can change our mind. We can definitely change the words. And if we change the words, we're changing the actions. If we can change those 3 things, you can change and affect the results. So absolutely. Andrew, for you, like, what's your perception of change?
Yeah, and I when we already talked like the pain of change and like where you got to go from that. But I'll just talk like the internal pieces of change. Like, then so many times, especially growing up in this business and coming from where I was, like I felt like I was just so behind everybody. Coming from stock and boxes, I dropped out of college, and I had an awesome fight with my dad that led into me like being homeless and having to figure things out on my own. So really what it looked like was is that I just had to really focus internally and say that if I keep doing this, I'm going to keep getting that. But if I just start working on being better, growing myself, taking each opportunity, not with a, oh my gosh, you're so far behind. There's so much things out there that you're maybe not going to achieve or can't do, and start being like, okay, what's the next step I can actually take right now that's going to help me progress a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And before I knew it, I mean, Ryan, it was like inside of a year, I felt like I had changed internally about how I viewed things, how I worked on things, how I did things, my activity, my work ethic, that people around me that had known me for years were just like, gosh, wow, man, like you feel like you're a different person now.
And people actually see that. And the law of correspondence talks about like your external life is an exact mirror of what's going on internal. And the same rules reverse is like when you think about fruit rots from the inside out. So when I think about like change, you know, I know one of the other things John Maxwell talks about is like when you see enough, they're inspired to. So here's the thing. There's probably definitely a lot of young entrepreneurs out there. And I got to ask you too, because I know we really didn't talk about like what kind of success you've had here. And I know this is going to be a part of change. Just out of curiosity, what does the income, I mean, what's the highest income month that you actually had deposited in your account? Either personal production and team, like combined. Where do you, just so people understand the type of success you've had for the age that you are. I think it's pretty impressive. So I think people, entrepreneurs out there that are inspiring to do this type of work, knowing it's a lot of hard work and change. I think it was important that we kind of give everyone just a little taste of what that meant to you. Like, what was the highest, you know, income month, and how did it, like, did you see some change in your life because of it? Or, you know, I'm just curious on that.
Well, I think that journey is incredible. So like the highest income month was really touching right about 30,000 a month. And, you know, early on that transition was really where you talk about change. Well, you transition from someone who delivered flowers for $10 an hour to then is writing a policy that pays me like $500, $600, $700, which would be like, you know, a week or 2 weeks worth of, you know, running around in the Arizona heat. And then you talk about now, you know, being able to consistently do that. And then you talk about being able to consistently do that with a team. And now you're getting, you know, 5, 8, 10, 12,000 a month of deposits that are from work that you didn't even do, from just people you've developed. So the income growth has not only allowed me to make a bigger impact on, you know, other people. Like you talk about the generosity, and Ryan, we can talk about this because you're one of the generous and most giving guys that I know. And I know you've always done that regardless of where the income's been for you. But just being able to do that, and also just talk about the, you know, the lifestyle stuff, and we've talked a little bit about that before, is just that income allows you to really have the level of freedom that you want, and it didn't require that great of a sacrifice, really, when we look at what we have over the last 7 years.
Thing. Yeah, like you'd say exactly that. It didn't require that big of a sacrifice to actually get to that level of income. Because so coming back from, just like you, Grant, making $1,500 a month, stocking boxes in a warehouse, to go from doing that to my first week in this industry, I made $1,500. I'm okay. I basically quadrupled my income. I worked 30, 40 hours a week stocking boxes and make $1,500. And over here, I worked, you know, a good solid work week to make $1,500. My mind was blown. But then fast forward, right? I went from making $1,500 in 1 week, and then all of a sudden I made $15,000 in a month. And I was like, holy smokes. I think like 2, 3 years later, all of a sudden I'm like, man, how big else could this be? My biggest month ever that we made about was like $52,000, $55,000 in a single month, mostly all from passive income. And once again, we go back to change. You want to talk about like life-changing money or mindset-changing money? Like all the things I really started thinking about, like, oh my God, I could actually potentially put down a down payment on a house or an investment in a couple months. Oh man, what else could this money actually do that could impact? Like one of the biggest things I've ever wanted to do, like I hear everything that you get to do with like the layaways and paying off people's layaways. When my good mentor, Jacob, loves to go buy a U-Haul. He gets 3 U-Hauls now, and he goes to his church every Christmas, and he fills it with kids' bikes and toys and everything, and gives all the less fortunate kids. And he has his kids hand it to them like as like a service piece. And I'm like, what else could we do? What else could I do? And one of the things I've been really thinking about recently is working with Charity Water, because they have a super cool mission just about taking drilling equipment to rural areas and drilling deep down and bringing a well so these people have access to clean water. They're not walking miles down end to go get that water. And it was just kind of one of those things that's like, man, you talk about change and what money can really do, and internally how it can change you to become a better person. Because I just think money just makes you more of who you already are.
Yeah.
How can that change you?
That's really, really, really interesting because getting in this business after leaving that franchise, I was $100,000 in debt. I had $26 to my name. I had every credit card maxed out. I told my wife we had to go to this conference thing, and she's like, we can't afford that. I said, what's another $1,000? being that in debt. So it's a fact that this industry and over guys in general, it's like things are changing all the time, right? So how we take change, so whether we have adversity to it or we change from adversity to curiosity, like I was desperate for any kind of change that was going to give me what I didn't have before, which means in order to get something new, I had to get rid of something old. And just so everybody knows, I had no background in insurance, none. It is 8 years in this business
like
now.
So many of us.
Yeah, so many of us, like no business, but that's why I wanted to be part of a system that at least I can plug into, and I was able just to follow the leader. I was just to become a follower. I didn't have to jump into a spot where, it's like it was all on me. And I already knew I didn't want all on me. I already knew, and I knew in order to get to where I want to go, I had to change. I had to physically change. And part of this thing on John Maxwell things, you have to see enough you're actually inspired to. Well, that's when you look at like our company, right? You look at Symmetry as a whole, you got all these amazing leaders that all came from, really interesting and tragedy type stories. And it's interesting because our relationship to darkness is crazy to me because people don't understand that like darkness doesn't have to kill the light. It can actually define it. And so like just the perspective of when you're looking at this stuff, like if you see enough, if you're plugged in it, listen, it doesn't even matter if you're with Symmetry. It could be any other company. You got to make sure you're plugged in. You got to see enough so a person will want to inspire enough to change, right? They got to see enough to get inspired. And the other one is like, they got to learn enough that they actually want to. Like if you're not there, if you're not present and you're not learning, then why would you even want to change? Because any road will lead you somewhere. It may not be where you want to go. And the last thing is you got to receive enough. This is the whole thing about the money. You got to receive enough that they're able to. And here's the thing, all in Symmetry ever wanted, they wanted me to stick around long enough so they can get out of me what they believe lies within me. Every single time. And it was through the mess. It was through the struggle. It was through all that crap that as a brand new agent, doesn't matter if you're with Symmetry or any other industry, when you look at that, it's struggle, dude. And listen, change, it's like that's the breeding ground. That's the breeding ground for change. So these people were just giving to me without any financial connection. And see, that told me about the culture because you can have an amazing company. They all have systems and processes, but the relationships and the people willing to give you before they ever received anything, that's the glue in the relationship of really what keeps everything together. And so when I started going from when our agency, we did over $20 million in premium, over 800 writers nationally. For a guy that's been here 8 years, it's because I wanted everyone on my team to succeed. I wanted them to be able to get it. If they wanted time and they wanted money, I was happy for them. Guys, change. If you came in here and you were 73 years old and you want to make $2,000 a month, I was happy for them because this is not about us.
It's about what they want.
It's about what they want, right? So what do you think about that?
Honestly, I'm gonna go back to some of the things that you said. Like you got to sometimes see yourself in the seat. And I think far too often, so many people are afraid to talk about the successes or things that are going on or like just mention things that in life are happening. But I think you said change. I love it when you talk about this stuff, Ryan, because the first thought I go in my head is like, man, what happens when I'm there? And immediately it starts to just kind of sprout this little seed of growth of like, okay, when we do $20 million, how are we going to do it? Oh, when we do $20 million, how much impact through change can I have in people that 80-year-old that wants to make $2,000 a month just so that they can go visit their grandkids every other weekend, right? Or they can just bring them tons of stuff. That person that maybe is a single mom that, I got one agent right now that divorced, single mom, doing her thing, 2-year-old kid, and she's about to make more this next month and then she's made in the past 3 months. And it's for a single mom like that. Like, it's just, so how can we continue to lead these people through change and help them? That's my next question for Grant is like, how would you lead people through change, especially whether they're struggling or not? They got to figure that out.
Yeah, I think it starts with, we always meet people where they are. So you talked about, maybe someone who comes in here with a certain income goal versus someone who has maybe a little bit bigger one, and we're okay with where everyone wants to come in at. And we always talk about, like, Ryan, you sort of mentioned, really you were kind of alluding to the fact that you make more deposits into people than you make withdrawals.
Yeah.
And that's how you talked about kind of the company, from the very beginning, made those deposits into you and your business to allow you to change in the positive way, so that, you're able to really earn that. And so I look at, working with people that we have, and I just think about, what can I do to want something for them and not from them? Exactly, Andrew. And then we have to define that with them, because most people don't know exactly what they want. And so that's part of it. They kind of know they want to be in a better situation. They know they need to change for the better, but they don't know exactly what change means or how to do it. And we come from this society of like, all right, you go to school, you get good grades, you go into college, you get debt.
Job.
Yeah. First you get credit card debt, then you get college debt, and then you get, home, mortgage debt, and then you get, every single step of the way, there's another financial banking product to put you into debt and to kind of take you down that rat race. And so the problem with being at the top of the rat race is you're still just a rat. So like the main thing about, I think what we get to do is we allow people to get what they want, and they define that for us. And then we work with them to do it. Like one example, you talk about, the single mom on your team that's having a lot of success. I got a text from an agent just this last Wednesday morning, and she had just earned her first bonus with us, slingshot bonus. And she sent me a text that said, I've been checking this email 50 times over. I still can't believe it. I've had, it said, congratulations on a stellar month, and here's a $1,300 bonus. And she said, I've had many stellar months in my life, decades of working. I've never got a $1,300 bonus.
That is so cool.
And like just seeing that win is what I know pushes me to get excited about finding that next person that we can make an impact on.
Yeah, the small wins. It's so hard when you're brand new in here, because you feel like and this is in the industry in general, right? Like it's hard to see where the next step goes. And so I think about like the structure of the company, and it's so funny because we know what the path is going to look like, but when you're brand new in here, you just have to, like you said, find the wins, and you got to meet where the people where they are, and your upline and your people that are with you, are they making the small deposits along the way through your entire journey in order to give you what you need, not what you feel like you want, but what they know you need. Because a lot of times people do not, it's interesting in this industry, based on where you are in like commission status and direction, they feel like you have to work for people. Listen, and I know in our agency, it's like we don't have bosses. Like we're literally all partners. And collectively, when you meet people where they are, do you know what happens? You have a collective relationship glue that happens, where now it's like you realize you're not perfect. Guys, we're not perfect. In fact, I preach how imperfect we are, because perfection actually lies within imperfection. And isn't that what family's all about? Like we talk about the ability to change, the money part of this whole thing. So I went from like, depositing or kind of making contributions to Make-A-Wish to actually granting wishes. I was able to, instead of going on carrier trips, I was able to put on, for agents, an entire trip. So this has to do with I want to give away 90% of my income and actually live on the 10%. And that's what this company has provided. It didn't matter when you talk about change, you got to let go of the person you were yesterday in order to get to that new and kind of grow into your new person that you want to be. But it has to be through change. It has to be, because the person you were yesterday is not going to get you and drive you to who you want to be. So this is about change. So if you're out here right now, I guess my big question is, what old thing are you going to let go so you can get something new? Because I think we got to leave, people with this, not only the belief level. And by the way, if the last thing you have is hope, I hope that people that you're on the team with, your team, is not depriving you or chopping that down. Because my belief is I don't qualify in, I let the system qualify out. Because you can't tell me in a 30-minute phone call that you know somebody's drive, you know somebody's hunger. Because at the end of the day, what happens when you impact that one single mom who was in a real tough marriage and direction, and all of a sudden she exploded and wrote $100,000 in premium for 3 months in a row, over 100 applications. And a lot of people are like, how did she do that? How do you go from that to this? It takes time, but it takes a tribe.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Well, let's talk about that, because I think part of change, the first part, is if you want to get something different, yes, you have to decide what you're going to give up in order to get that, but you also have to decide who are you going to get with in terms of an association standpoint.
Yep.
So let's maybe dive in there, because the two people on the other side of this table have been incredibly influential in my journey here, and you two have always been just such supporting, uplifting people. And it's like, Ryan, that's one thing that just like you're known as. You're just a lifter. Like, every time you leave a conversation with you, you never feel like, oh man, I just, got scolded, or like, they're maybe a little bit negative about what's going on. Everything has always been, you leave the conversation feeling so much better about yourself and where you're headed. And so I think that's a big part of it is, you always talk about you're kind of the sum of the 5 people you hang around. You're kind of the sum of their income and their habits and all that stuff. But it's really true from the standpoint of there's people that are having a very substantial negative impact on you, and you might not even realize it.
Yeah.
And part of realizing it is by getting around better people and realizing, I just left a conversation with Ryan and Andrew, and I feel like $1 million. But it made me realize, well, last night when I was hanging out with Steve, like Steve's kind of a negative guy. Yeah. When you're hanging around positive people, you realize how negative people are.
Yeah. And and sometimes, there's that's the hardest thing. Sometimes that's your family.
Yeah.
And to remove yourself from those environments and to kind of move into those places, it's one of the hardest pieces in life and in general. And you might be looking at this thing, you're like, wow, okay, like change, I got a lot to work to do. Sometimes the hardest piece is just remembering that sometimes you got to let go of who you are now in order to become the person you're always meant to be. And that's a hard thing for people to do.
So when you talked about family, and this is for everybody out there, how many times, if you're a new agent, doesn't matter, again, what company you're with, this is just in general to help a lot of you out. How many times do we take what happened to us today, and the first people we want to tell, you talked about associations, is our family. So they get used. Listen, your family, people closest don't want to see you in pain. They don't.
They hate it, yeah.
They don't. So all of a sudden they're in protector mode. And so what do they want to do? Don't do it. You should quit. You should quit. You talked about associations. So here's the thing. We flip the script, everybody. I tell all the agents and people working, let's flip the script. So instead, and when you have a bad day, no. You're going to be grateful on finding the win in the day. And to everybody else in your home, when they asked you how your day was, Grant, it was amazing because I did self-development, because I impacted another agent, because I did another interview, and I think that this person is going to be amazing for them and what they want. But I'm not going to pick the negative things out, because what do you think is going to happen? Association, all of a sudden you think your circle is a circle. It's not. You look around, it's a cage. And you're trapped. So what do you need to do? You got to flip the script. And that starts, listen, your thoughts, whatever you give, you're like your thoughts to, you're giving life to. So if it's negative, you're feeding that. If it's positive, so how many times do you think that you're flying at a different altitude? Because the next part of this outside of family is sometimes it's the closest friends, like you mentioned. Yeah. And they are not meant to hit the altitude that you're already going. Like you two are been amazing in this company. So like, what would you tell somebody out there? How would they recognize if because you just said, give somebody an action step, Grant. Give Andrew, what did you do when an agent sit there and go, listen, you notice what they're saying. You notice that they're being negative and they don't know what they're in, right? Because it's natural for them. So what would you guys suggest?
Well, I guess the first thing is thinking about, are the people that you hang around, basically, do they have what you want? I think that's the first step, is just taking a little bit of an inventory. Hey, I'm around some people, and I kind of think to myself, all right, well, this guy maybe is someone that goes out every night of the week, and he kind of is always working for the weekend, and he's never really excited about anything, and like there's just so many red flags. I think that you can, if you really stop and look around, you can identify them. And then you just kind of think about who's one person. So the action step is, who's one person you admire. We all have one person we admire. There's all one person we know that was successful or is successful, or at least is, always that positive source of energy. And I think another big part of it is personality. We all know that people that one person is just so easy to get along with. Like, you know what? I don't think that guy has a single enemy. And you're like, I don't know how they do it, but everyone loves them. So I would just say, find that one person and just try and make one action step towards spending some extra time with them. Because then you hang out with that one person and now you're in an entire community of those type of people, because good people know good people. And so, they always talk about we're just a couple degrees of separation away from anyone on the planet. And so it's like, well, Ryan, if you're the guy that I don't really know a whole lot of people that I feel are positive or successful, but you're that one guy, I'm going to be like, hey, Ryan, can I buy you a coffee? Can I take you out for lunch? Can I just maybe talk to you for 5 or 10 minutes? And by naturally just kind of having where you're at rub off on me, now I'm elevating myself above the crowd that I was in. And now I'm more worthy of being in your circle. And then the problem is, you talk about, maybe that pain of having to leave some of those people behind. You have to have some honest conversations with yourself, is that you probably are going to outgrow certain people. Like, there's a reason that I hang out with very, very few people my age. We hang out with very few people our age, because they're just not personally developed in the way that we want for what we're going for. And so the majority of my friends are, they're 40, 50, 60 years old. They've already, lived a lifetime of kind of, pain and struggle and success and now triumph. And now I'm hanging out with them and learning their story to figure out how I can kind of shortcut a little bit to the triumph.
Yeah. How about you, Andrew?
I'm just going to go back to some of the things that you just mentioned there. Like you mentioned, association, I think, is the biggest piece. There's two pieces of way to really change quickly. It's you got to read and you got to associate. But then in order to get the time from those individuals, you just mentioned, like, hey, let me buy you a coffee. Let me find a way to give you value first before you take it, which Ryan is what he's been saying this whole time, is like when you have those agents helping them get there. So like one thing that I would tell people all the time that really want to change is just, you got to look internally as to really what you want. And you got to look internally, and you got to know there's two types of people. There's two ways to brighten up a room. You can either be the person that walks in, that lights everything up, or you can be the person that walks out, that took the darkness with you. So you need to figure out, like, what type of person are you and how you're going to really change that internally. And then associating, reading, growing. It takes time. It takes change.
Well, and hopefully something that's a little bit comforting, though, is that this is not this crazy mountain to climb. Like, that's another piece of this, is that developing yourself and growing, it's just about getting 1% better every day, or just making slight incremental changes. And so, like, when you get around people that are that positive influence and that are doing really well, you kind of realize at the end of the day, they're not that different. They just think slightly different, right, Ryan?
So it's interesting because most people, when they're developing, they think, hey, listen, let me read at the end of the night. And I got to ask you guys, you ever had agents at just by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they're exhausted?
Yeah.
Like, literally you're falling asleep. Yeah. And let me tell you why, is because you started your day and your battery, your internal battery, wasn't fully charged. And by the way, this, for you guys that are new in this industry, here's the thing. If you're feeling like exhausted, we got to change our development part in the morning. The first part of the morning needs to be you. It does not need to be, listen, and I love with the spouses, I love my wife and my daughter, but that's a deposit that you're going to take and give to your, like for me, my wife and my daughter. So the first part of the day needs to be you. Needs to be you. You take the time, you overcharge, because here's what's going to happen. It's going to happen. Change of wind. You're going to have cancellations. You're going to have, it doesn't matter, bad book rates, and you're going to have no-shows. And there's always, we know it's going to come up. So what do? If I got ups and downs in this business, the one thing I can do is make sure that I'm overcharged in the morning, knowing the fact that I'm going to go with some discharge stuff. It's like on your phone when you finally take, your Bluetooth. If you have your Bluetooth, or you get on Zoom on your phone and you're on Zoom, your battery gets depleted faster, because different things take different parts of energy. So guys, you got to maintain your energy. So the first thing you're going to change is our internal, our self-development. And I would start by making sure you take care of you. And if you're still exhausted, you have breaks in the course of the day, because no one can tell me that working 7 days a week, I can prove that working 5 days a week or 4 days a week is actually much more productive, and the results will show it because we're managing our energy, because we're changing our dynamics. We're not giving what we don't have in the morning. We're flipping the script there.
Yeah, I want to hit a few things about like morning routines because number one is, especially if you're just waking up and rolling straight into work and there's no me time, it's not you, you're not, basically you're starting your day to go to work, right? And in our industry, we get to be self-employed, so why don't you start the day to grow you? Like start the day for you. When you roll out of bed, you jump straight into work, you check those emails, you got a call in 15, 20 minutes, right? Like, what are you doing? You're literally just dragging yourself through the day versus kicking it off for you.
Hey, how about you get the text message from the agent? Remember, we're out in Arizona, so we're getting texts from
East
people
Coast.
and East Coast people. It's 5 o'clock in the morning.
5 a.m.
Man, listen, I need to find this right now. And my response is, good morning.
Good morning
Good
to you.
morning. Good afternoon. How are you? Listen, you can't tell people, and this goes to what you're saying, meeting where people where they are. You can't tell people their feelings are wrong, but you can wrap up all the positivity that I had to do with like Miranda calling me 5 o'clock in the morning. And I woke up like, good morning, Vietnam, kind of Robin Williams, like happy. He's like, good morning. Yeah, that was me. Like no matter what, but you had to start off like, I couldn't look at my emails because guess what? You saw a chargeback or you saw somebody going through struggle. Guys, you're going to see people going through struggle. Friction's good. You can keep your damp stack, the negative people, keep your damp stack of wood away from me. I always tell people, it's like, no, I can't handle it. But I mean, really good stuff, dude.
Yeah. Good.
No, I was going to say then the next thing is like a lot of people say like, okay, like, well, what's a morning routine? Like, what can I do? And I think this is the most important thing is don't get too focused on the fact that you don't feel like you have a morning routine or that it's not good enough because it will never be good enough. Because there's plenty of days that I've started where I've got 30 minutes to a meeting and all I do is, wake up, listen to some jazz music, drink some cup of coffee, and then just roll into the day nice and easy. And that's totally good for me. Throw on a podcast, throw on audio. But I'm taking all that time to internally just ease into my morning and process my mind. So like whatever your morning routine is I just say make sure that you make it for you. That's the most important
And it's
thing.
because you don't want to start behind. And I've struggled with, I've really struggled with this. You two have been the 5 a.m. club forever and have done such a good job, with creating this morning and always encouraging people to start it the right way. And I've just always been a night person and I've always kind of wanted to wake up 20 minutes before I had to do my first thing. And the more that I do have those days, I realize by how I am so burned out early in the afternoon. But even the day, I could, have something that comes at me right when you wake up and you got 50 texts and 50 emails. On those days where I just immediately dive into that, I find myself just burned out early in the afternoon. But I could have a day where I just, even if it is a few minutes in the morning to kind of take time for yourself, just kind of relax and think.
Yeah.
I love how you like jazz music. I didn't take you for a jazz guy, but I like it.
There's something special about it in the morning with a cup of coffee.
It is smooth.
Listen to you.
Smooth jazz.
Yeah, I like it.
But, by just doing that little thing, now you're capable of handling 2, 3, 4x amount of things and not being burned out in that process.
Now let's go a little further in that. Listen, if you're going through some health stuff, like Miranda was really interesting. She was going through some health stuff and I asked her, I was like, even at a 25% capacity, she was doing more stuff than most. I'm like, how are you doing it? She goes, well, it's simple. I had to do more for myself in the morning. If at the end of the day, you're feeling negative, you have to make adjustments on that includes the change in your self-development. So even if you start with just a video, maybe you're not feeling well. So guess what? I asked Miranda what she did. She said, I'd self-developed twice as much time because my body needed it. So as things change, you got to be willing to accept the fact that change is good. You need the wind, both back and front. You need that. Because it strengthens the conditioning and everything that we're doing here, guys, is understanding that we want to impact so many people out there in general, but it all starts with change and mess. And remember, I always say it, there's a message in every mess. So I tell you it, but we got to start with that, right? You got to have enough mess to do that. By the way, that does include uncomfortable relationships. That does include associations. That does include doing things I feel like it's the yes man. I think everybody needs, yes. I think everybody should do yes. Instead of saying no, do the opposite, everyone. If it looks like it's not good for you, I'm telling you, your old self, the reason where you're at right now is because of those decisions that you made up to this point. How about we try something different? How about say yes instead of saying no? How about you say yes for conference calls, yes for impact, yes for association? Start saying yes on the things that you struggle with the most, and you're going to see change. You're going to see it because you can't hide it.
Yeah. And then when you do start saying yes and you start outgrowing the pack, they're going to start trying to bring you back down. You know, they talk about like crabs. There's this one species of crab where when you catch it, you don't actually have to have like a trap for it. Because once one gets in there and they all get in there, if they ever try and leave, the rest of them will pull the crab down literally to the point of breaking their legs if they try and escape the pack. And so there's some people that are just like that we have in our lives, and they're the ones where they just, by their comments or by their vibe or by, you know, the way that they maybe judge certain things that you try and do,
The toxicity that they have.
they're the ones that are trying to break your legs, dragging you down. And so that's the other thing is just to be aware of, is part of making that positive change is, you're going to have to adapt to things that are uncomfortable and new and embrace them, and you're going to have to adapt to saying goodbye to some people that you thought were your friends.
So let's talk about that, because this is a really good topic. So how do you do that? Like, I mean, so like your actions should speak so much volume and like louder than any word you can possibly say. So you think about your guys' environments. It doesn't matter what team you're on. Okay, listen, small teams, big teams. This has to do with this running race together. When you have so much positivity and you have one negative person out there, I want to, I mean, it's like an ocean. Like I'm dumping the entire ocean on that because you're not going to do it. It's not going to make a dent in the positivity that we create. So what does your environment look like today?
Well,
so listen, with all the change that's going on in our industry right now, I got to ask everybody, have we adjusted our environments? Have we adjusted? Meaning, I think we get big egos in this business. I really do. I think leaders in general, I think we, even people that write high production, it's, a lot of times it could be me. But guess what? You can go really, really, really fast, but you're not going really, really, really far.
Yeah.
Because you can't go far and fast. That's the goal. And the only way you're going to possibly get that is by running the race together. And it doesn't matter if it's $2,000 premium. It doesn't matter if it's $20,000 premium. What environment can you make sure you're not getting emotionally like drained by the naysayers, the negative people? What environments are you guys putting out there today that's going to help your team? And guess what you do? The best thing you can do on that is let go of your ego, because I already knew I didn't want to be the guy. I did not want to be the person doing everything, Grant. I want to be the person that I understand that I have a decent skill set in something. And I know, Grant, you're amazing. And Andrew too. And you got people in this industry like John and Brandon, all these leaders. But collectively, it reminds me of Transformers.
Yeah.
Or Voltron, even better.
Voltron's the best one.
You got all your pieces, right? But sometimes, in this example, right? And sometimes in this example, guys, you can be really good apart, but when you collectively create a different environment, it doesn't matter how much change comes out, because you have a support blanket that's so big. It doesn't matter if you're building a 1-bedroom shack or a mansion. It's not in quicksand, it's in solid ground. And the leaders and the collective work actually fills in the cracks. Because along the way, we get lost. I think along the way, which we forget, we're just kind of, the change happens and we get a small little crack over here, Andrew. We get a small little crack over here. And then all of a sudden, integrity starts dropping. And all of a sudden, like there's, oh man, now we got more negativity. And this little tiny negativity, this little tiny just me, has become a cancer. And all of a sudden, it's like it's so loud. And like collectively, that's where we got to start pulling things back.
Let me go to your analogy for a second, and then like give people like a really good visual to this. Like that, how long does it take for that little crack to become a fissure? Okay. Have you ever been driving down the highway and all of a sudden a rock or something flings up and cracks your windshield? And at first it's fine, right? It's fine. There's no issues. But what happens those times when all of a sudden you open up your door and you look back over and you got a giant line that cracked all the way down? You're like, when did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, it's because through the constant change, maybe the environment's not right. Now, maybe you're not taking care of yourself. Maybe there's other outside influences, like you slammed your car a little too hard. Like these little pieces, internalize this, think about this metaphor. How long until that tiny little dent becomes a massive fissure that now you got to try to figure out?
Yeah. And what's The only way to really gain perspective on that is just when you do see that big difference. Because, like, you ever look at someone after not seeing them for 5 or 10 years and you're like, man, you got taller, or man, you got in better shape, or it's like,
Or man, you got fatter.
Yeah,
you got your
bigger.
bald. You lost your hair and you got silver hair.
That's right.
hair.
But, hey, listen,
thank you for that.
Here,
Yeah,
Ryan,
Don't
but
worry
you're
about
still
that.
so
Don't
sexy,
worry
so
about
don't worry about
You
it.
stop it right now.
But because of that time apart, and
Yeah.
then you finally see it, you're allowed to see the big difference. So, for example, like whenever I go back home to San Diego and I hang out with some of my college friends, or
Yeah.
high school friends rather, I realize how different I am than they are. Like how the changes that I've had to make have put me in a position where I'm on a path that associates with people at a different caliber. And because of that, I have the perspective to see some people that unfortunately have kind of stayed in the same lane for far too long. Like, I had a guy who I spent, in high school, was my best friend, thought he was a really good guy, and now he's like on his 3rd DUI, and he's just like, not the very most uplifting, positive guy. And so you asked earlier, you kind of said, like, how do you maybe eliminate those type of people? And we can't eliminate people. We're not like,
No,
this isn't
they're
like
still-
Squid Games.
Listen,
it's
I
not
know,
like,
yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah,
out.
yeah. Red light, green light,
But
you're going
you
down.
adjust.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just make adjustments. It's
Yeah.
just making incremental changes.
So listen, and like you talked about in the beginning, it's like you talk about associate. There's people that are brand new agents that have a serious like problem reaching out to their uplines, and then guess what they feel like? Because Andrew or Grant, you're not calling them. Why didn't you call me more? And their perspective is that you should have been reaching out to me. And if you ever hear that kind of stuff, you know what I'm thinking? Like the teacher won't appear until the student's ready. So if like we talk about like when somebody's calling me, they're open to hearing coaching and mentoring, and like it'll define their roadmap to the purpose of where they want to go. If not, if I have to call them, I'm listening to them on the things that's going on with them. If you have uplines and you guys have managements out there, like you guys, your hierarchies and direction, whoever you're working with, I hope people are lifting you up and not tearing you down. I hope you there's building blocks to all this. So what can we do with brand new people? Here's my suggestion. My suggestion is you just said, find that one person. Maybe it's that one person you respect, and you just send them an email on Facebook and say, okay, can I get 5 minutes? And here's the biggest question you got to ask. Like, you got to say, what's next? Everyone, what's next? If you can't ask what's next because you want to get to where they are, and there's so much things that you look at them and you're just so inspired. If you're not willing to ask that question, receive it, and do it, what
do you do?
There's no change. And by the way, if you made that, you didn't make that choice. It was chosen because you didn't do it. Any action and inaction still has an impact on people, whether you like it or not. And that includes all the new people. If they're not plugging into things, if they feel like they're an introvert, they feel like they don't have enough influence. Guys, influence and all this stuff happens when you're building relationships over time, but that needs to change.
Man, maybe we'll save this for another topic for another time.
Yeah.
But like, it's just the power of actually just caring about your people. I'm telling you, it is dramatic how much movement, engagement you can get in people by literally just about caring about them, sending a little text here and there, telling them that you're proud of them. Maybe that's what we'll call it, the power of being proud. I'm telling you, like we could go a whole
Power
full,
being proud. Okay,
like
I think
that.
that's be the next
a
one
whole-
for us.
a
Yeah.
full hour of that, like all the small little texts, all the little calls. Watching an agent, all of a sudden their dog dies. You send them a thing. You'd send them a text that saying, "Hey man, I'm so proud of you because of how hard you ran." I've got agents right now that are running for their promotions, and it comes down to always, hey, except for some people, the last 2 days of the month. Mm-hmm. But I had 2 agents that may or may not hit it. I don't know. But this whole time, I'm just keep telling them, do you know how proud I am of you? Yeah. Because every single day you're working right now. You've put in the hours. And there was one gal. Monday she sold a policy or protected a family. Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday, nothing. Thursday, nothing. Friday, nothing until 6 p.m. And she still needs like $5,000. So like about 5 families more helped. But then Friday came and she sold a $2,000 policy. Mm-hmm. But see, my whole time talking to her, even though she can feel down and she's like, oh, gosh, I'm just pressing forward. And I'm just like, hey, look, whether it happens or not, I want to let you know how proud I am of you. Because the persistency and the effort is what matters. You see the people that are behind you that are watching you right now, whether you hit it or not, it's not their concern, but they're watching how you operate at the end of the month.
You can mentor and coach process all day long, but when you mentor people, like when you put people first, like this is This is such, man. We're gonna spend an entire hour on this.
Yeah,
like
we'll
this.
have to.
I know
Let's
based
save
on
it
our
for
time,
another
we're gonna cut it. But man, it starts with just with you guys. It's funny that we get to grow this thing together. And I tell you what, I'm just so excited. And if you're brand new out there, man, you just go through the suck. You got to get through all the challenges.
That's right. And maybe if we can leave it with this, it's that everyone out there has what you want and they're willing to give it to you.
They're not as selfish as you think.
Yeah.
I think that's
anything you want, it's available by someone who literally wants to go out of their way to teach it. Like, we are all hungry to give this knowledge to other people. Like, this is a big recharge to pour into other people.
Yeah.
And in order to pour into other people, you got to start, of course, by filling up your cup, making sure you're good. We talked about that, which is why you start your mornings the right way.
And be curious, because you got to go from you got to go from adversity, like you just don't have enough, to maybe you have plenty and you just have to ask more questions. Be curious out there, everybody.
Yeah, be curious, and then also make sure you're the one. Like, we talk about being around positive people, it starts with you got to be that positive person. Yeah. That's the big thing. It's like, how do people leave conversations with you? Do they leave and go, oh man, maybe it is starting to rain. Like, they're just not that. They're not.
The lightning struck me 5 times this week.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if the sun's coming out.
Lights up the room.
Hey, you've seen that though. You've seen
it.
No matter what, it's like, oh, charge back. All of a sudden, charge back. I mean, my God, they're building up a sea of misery. Listen, let's get out there and let's make an impact. That's what I love this. So, what are we calling our next?
I think we talk about just the power of being proud. I'm telling you,
I like it.
It's gonna be a hell of a call.
All right,
gonna be a good one.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right, boys.